fact that he is saying without blushing about it at all, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get back at everybody who's wronged me. I'm going to turn the forces of the law loose on people who don't like Donald Trump. All of us ought to be very worried about that.
Now, the judge at Donald Trump's hush money trial has threatened him with jail if he continues to violate a gagging order in the case after fining him $9,000 for separate violations. He made the announcement before a second week of witness testimonies, which began earlier on today. The fines were for breaking the gagging order on his with Truth Social posts, where he criticised some of the witnesses in the case. Outside the courtroom, Trump criticised the ruling.
This judge is terrible, and Kaplan is terrible. Gave a person, I have no idea who she is, $91 million. This is a corrupt system we're in.
Well, Donald Trump is facing 34 felony counts of falsifying business records for allegedly covering up evidence of hush money payments to the former porn star Stormy Daniels. Let's talk to Frank Bowman, who is the author of High Crimes and Misdemeanors, A History of Impeachment for the Age of Trump. Good evening to you, Frank.
Hi, Carol.
Really good to have you with us. Tell us, first of all, a bit about the fines that have already been imposed on Donald Trump.
Of course, for Donald Trump, $9,000 in fines is like, the pennies under the couch of your car seat in terms of its actual effect on his fiscal position. But I think the judge here was firing a shot across his bow by saying, first, I'm going to find you in contempt of court because you plainly are violating my orders. I'm going to signal that by asking you to pay fines or requiring you to pay fines. And I'm going to tell you, in addition to that, if you keep this nonsense up, there's at least some possibility I'll put you in jail. It's hard to say what effect this is going to have on Mr. Trump and his tendency to run his mouth in the future. But certainly the judge has indicated what he might do.
Yeah, because, I mean, Donald Trump wastes no opportunity to, as we heard him there, speak out about how this is all a politically motivated case against him, criticizing the judge, criticizing the lawyers and everyone involved.
Sure, but you'll notice in his little outburst that you put in front of the audience a moment ago, he didn't criticize any of the people that the judge had ordered him not to. The judge's order allows him to be critical, for example, of the judge himself. But Trump didn't say anything about the witnesses and other folks he's not supposed to talk about. We'll see if that persists.
Well, just maybe he's listening to what the judge is saying. Tell us a bit more about what's been happening in the actual case, Frank, because we have been hearing more evidence of about these alleged hush money payments.
As far as I can tell, the last couple of days have been basically dealing with the particulars of the negotiations for payments made to both Stormy Daniels, well known as the porn star, and also to Karen McDougal, who was a Playboy model, essentially a nude model for Playboy, who apparently did have some sort of affair with Trump sometime before. And so much of the testimony of the last couple of days has been dealing with, okay, how are these payments to these women negotiated? What bank accounts were they run through? Who talked to whom about what? How does all this work through the National Enquirer or not work through the National Enquirer? So this is just the nuts and bolts of these payments, establishing that in fact that they were made, they were negotiated, and the people who did the negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the National Enquirer there. This is the newspaper that we've heard from David Pecker, who's the publisher. and he was essentially had reached an agreement to try to use his paper to bolster Trump's presidential campaign and try and kill off negative stories, including those about his relationship with Stormy Daniels.
That's correct. And as I think we talked about when last you and I spoke, one of the most remarkable parts of that testimony to me was not even so much the catch and kill schemes and the payments to the women, but the fact that the National Enquirer was apparently part of a quite concerted effort to put out not only to suppress bad stories about Trump, but also to put out false stories about Trump's rivals, political rivals. The pretty amazing look into both the tabloid world generally, but more particularly how this tabloid enlisted as as a full partner with Trump in trying to get him elected in 2016.
And what we've been hearing today is some details of some of the texts which do allegedly lend more credibility to the claims about the payments made to Stormy Daniels.
Certainly, one of the things that, of course, the prosecution faces, the challenges that it faces here, is that a number of its witnesses, Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, the ex-Playboy model, if she testifies, are people who can, as lawyers would say, be easily impeached because they're doing kind of sleazy stuff. But the key here for the prosecution is to establish through texts and through paper documents and the testimony of other people whose testimony is less easily impeached, that in fact these somewhat sleazy people, these self-promoting people, can in fact be believed, because there's there's a whole scaffolding of actual indisputable evidence indicating that what they're telling the public, what they're telling the jury, what they're telling the judge is true.
Of course, one of the problems, many problems facing Donald Trump, is that this case, which, as I understand it, has several more weeks to run, is preventing him from hitting the campaign trail. But I'm seeing that he's spoken out today and vowed that if he does win a second term in the White House, he'll appoint his own real special prosecutor to investigate Joe Biden.
That's pretty darn terrifying in a way, because it's part of an overall pattern of declarations by Mr. Trump over the last few months, indicating that if he gets elected, the first and maybe principal task on in his agenda is going to be retribution against anyone who he thinks has wronged him. Now, of course, he's claiming that Joe Biden is somehow or other behind these prosecutions, which is, I think, untrue. He's being prosecuted by a number of offices, a number of agencies in both states and in the federal government. The notion that Joe Biden is particularly ordering any of this is, I think, utterly unsubstantiated. But, in Trump world, this is all a Biden-driven plot. And therefore, his response is, well, I'm going to get back at him. And who knows whether he would be able to actually accomplish that if he were to get back in office. But the fact that he is saying without blushing about it at all, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get back at everybody who's wronged me. I'm going to turn the forces of the law loose on people who don't like Donald Trump. All of us ought to be very worried about that.
We've reflected frequently on this program on the extraordinary situation that Donald Trump still appears to be marginally in the lead in the presidential race, despite not just this case unfolding, but a whole series of other potential cases looming against him. And the fact that none of this seems to have any effect, certainly on the Republican base and his loyal fans who are going to turn out and vote for him. But as this case continues, do you think that it could affect voters more widely when we do get closer to the presidential election?
As you've said, and as I've said many times, and as many people have observed, Trump is remarkably immune, seemingly immune to the kinds of considerations that would affect any previous presidential candidate, particularly in his base. None of this stuff seems to bother them. But this election is not going to be decided by Donald Trump's base. It's going to be decided by people who are not, deeply committed to him, who are not, totally steeped in this notion that somehow there's that vast scheme against him. That it's going to be decided by, the famous group of undecided voters, and for those folks, I think, hope. The constant exposure during these trials to the various disagreeable things that Mr. Trump has done should have some effect. Also, I think placing him in a posture which is in which he's deeply uncomfortable, that is to say, one in which he is not in control, where he plainly is subordinate to the officers of the law. I think one hopes, at least, that places him in proper perspective, that diminishes him from his somewhat self-proclaimed mythical status to just a guy who is in an awful lot of trouble because he's done a lot of sleazy stuff. And one suspects that at the margins that will affect the election.
Frank Bowman, author of High Crimes and Misdemeanors, A History of Impeachment for the Age of Trump. Really good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carol.